What's going on, squad? So today's topic is how I train my clients on the Isochain. And there is a process that's set up here that I follow each and every time I have someone new on the Isochain, whether it's like this, where we did a demonstration in my hometown here, and we were just going over, hey, let's cover some basic exercises on here. So you can see me adjusting the bar, making sure the loading ring is pointing straight down for her. For her, she's just ready to rip on the bar. But for me, as the person training said client, or in this case, just friend, I need to understand that her positioning is everything on the Isochain. I can't just allow her to rip and her foot placement is off, her gait's off, her shoulders, her hand placement, all that stuff. It has to be perfect. So here, I'm training a client of mine. His goal, it's important to first find out what is your client coming to you for. So for him, he is using the Isochain to strengthen up his joints. Now, as you can see, he's wearing wraps on his knees and his arms. He's been lifting for years. He is a very strong man. He's a very strong man. I've known him for a while. Very cool, very friendly, very awesome, and very strong. So I already know that his numbers are good. So I need to make sure that he gets bulletproofed on the Isochain so that when he's training, lifting those big weights, that he is able to continue lifting those big weights without any type of flare-ups or tendonitis. He's had a couple of recurring injuries and they're all joint related. So I told him that we should really hit up the Isochain. He's seen what the Isochain's about. He understands the science. He understands the benefits of isometric training and strengthening up the connective tissues. So we have already been through that conversation, and he was like, yeah, you can go ahead and sign me up. So as you can see here, I'm coaching him on the proper Zercher squat form on the Isochain. Essentially what I'm telling him here is to contract his core, keep it tight, and launch upward into the bar using his quadricep muscle. That is really going to have a very good strengthening effect in his knees. I told him that just from an anatomy standpoint, but also from a personal standpoint, as that's what I initially started using the leg exercise on Isochain for. It actually wasn't to get super strong. It was to fix my knees first and then get super strong with my legs later. So he saw my results with my knees, and that's why he's here. Now, it's important to make sure that you have the right form here with the Zercher squat, because it's easy to turn that into a Zercher deadlift. And so remember, we're training for joint health. That is what he signed up for here. And so I have to make sure that he's not recruiting muscle fibers that don't belong in the lift. So if I'm not coaching him correctly, he's going to end up wasting time here. So remember, the Isochain is really all about angles. More so, I'd say, than a lot of its dynamic counterparts, because if the angle is wrong by just a bit, maybe by the chain link, or if it's just wrong for the body's positioning, performing the Isochain exercise, you could spend months wasting your time on the Isochain. It has to be the right angle. Another thing to keep in mind when training people on the Isochain, now this could be a client, whether you're also a personal trainer, if you're a physical therapist, or if you bought the Isochain and you just have a friend over, you want to make sure that they're doing it right, because yes, they can get hurt. They can get hurt on the Isochain, okay? What you want to really emphasize here as our next major focal point is their first lifts are probably not going to be that good. And they can be a seasoned lifter as well. But chances are, even if they are, they're probably not used to firing 0 to 100 on the iso chain like this. Overcoming isometric training is entirely different from bodybuilding. It's different from powerlifting, although there are some similarities there, as powerlifting is a lot of power movements, and the iso chain, when at least going for strength, mimics some of those powerlifting principles, some of them. But when we first started training on the iso chain, my client here that you see right here, his neural pathways weren't really ready to fire like what's required in the iso chain training. This is 0 to 100, type 2 muscle fiber, fast twitch, all that good stuff. And it's a different training. You can be seasoned and still not have your best numbers on your very first iso chain session. But I made sure to point out to him as we continued our iso chain training throughout the weeks that was going to be in effect. And go figure, near the end of our training, it started to go a lot higher, and that's because his body was getting used to it. Same thing here. Now, even though this was a demo, my client here in the red, he was training with me for the iso chain for probably, I would say, about 4 to 6 weeks. Definitely a solid 4. He went up 40% in his month that he was using the iso chain. So he's a little bit more accustomed than, let's see, the guy in the gray shirt, and he's more accustomed than the guy in the blue shirt. The guy in the black shirt there, that's my friend Steve, and the girl in the light blue, she is a previous client of mine. So they actually have all been on the iso chain before, so they are a little bit more used to iso chain training. Now, as I set my buddy up on this, we're still doing strength. Later on this day, I was doing an iso chain seminar. If you haven't seen the video, here's a link right here. Go ahead and check that out. It's the iso chain seminar video. I was just going over some facts and figures for iso chain. But afterwards, we did a demo. So I wanted to show everyone that attended the seminar, I wanted to show them strength lifts, which are pretty much what has been the main focus of the channel. Not the whole time, but the majority of the time. But I wanted to switch it up and show them the strength/hypertrophy lifts, the straight hypertrophy lifts, and the endurance lifts. And once they held for the strength/hypertrophy, I believe right now he's holding for hypertrophy without having a timer on hand. He started to feel it. A lot of them were sweating. This is an entirely different style of training here. You can see it now with his form, right? You could see that his back was bending a little bit. Now, at first I let it go, but then I informed him, hey, you want to keep your lower back straight. That way, all the tension is on the front delt, because that was the iso chain shoulder front raise. You could see him trying to wring that out. He felt that. I know he felt that. For about 45 seconds, man, his shoulders were on fire. And it doesn't take much. It doesn't take much for the load on the iso chain to really affect the client. So it's important to watch them. As I do with my clients in the weight room, I'm always watching their face. They may not even pay attention to it, and they're just focusing on the workout at hand. But my job as a trainer, I have to watch them. I have to make sure I'm watching them at all times, or I'll miss subtle cues on how to progress them. If it seems like it's too easy, I might end up progressing them, and that's on me. When it comes to training others on the iso chain, I'll leave us with this. Let's make sure that we really take the time to make sure that their positioning, I already mentioned positioning, their positioning is near perfect when they first start on the iso chain. Because if they plan on continuing, what they do the first time is what they're going to continue to do for the duration of the iso chain training. Okay, and it's really not that much. It's just link up the chain link and then you rip. So since it's such a simple setup, let's say for the bicep curl here, if his bar was right up against his stomach and his elbows were behind him, that's the drag curl. he would be used to the drag curl every time he tried to do a bicep curl. It's up to me to make sure that I explain to him the differences, the subtleties, what different areas are getting worked with just a simple angle change, bringing the bar from his stomach out into the open like that. Now you can see my other client here, he already went into position. I had to tell the guy in the blue to come out like that. He already knew. He just immediately went into position. So he's used to it. So he's over here performing the hypertrophy lift on the Isochain. He's doing fantastic, by the way. But he knew exactly what to do because he had the prior proper, correct training with us beforehand. So it's important. As you can see, it's very important to train people on here properly.